Erev Tov, Kiryat Motzkin. Good morning in Memphis. Greetings. My name is Wayne Firestone. It's great to be back with everyone. I'm actually broadcasting today from South Florida, where we know in North Florida, many of our friends and families have their eye on a storm. So we'll give them a pass on today's show. But more importantly, just our thoughts go out to everyone that may be in harm's way. And, you know, a couple of weeks ago, it was on the other coast in California. And I see we have Linda from San Diego who's with us today. Glad that passed through without any major problem. We are a community. We've been a community now together virtually for almost 3 years now, broadcasting since way before the pandemic about Israel. And we do so out of a common love for Israel. Some have referred to that love even as a disease. One of our panelists mentioned our passion for Israel is incredible, and we've really been able to explore that in some unique ways. And today, you're in for a real treat with our panelists. I want to sort of kick this off with a more personal reflection from the audience members who are here. We're going to be looking at folks who literally have devoted them a large chunk of their time to collecting memorabilia about Israel and pre-state Israel. But we know that many of us, from the very first time perhaps that we made a visit to Israel or heard a remarkable story about Israel, that we sort of clipped an article or we saved a postage stamp from somebody visiting there or living there, a friend, a family, a loved one. And I want to ask everyone maybe to just share something in the chat very briefly. If there's an artifact that you have, maybe it's a piece of art, maybe it's a piece of clothing, maybe it's a photograph that you sort of keep in a fond place and look at, sometimes displaying it maybe in your living room and sharing it with guests, and every now and then somebody will ask about it. If there's a piece of memorabilia, a memory that you have that is depicted in an artifact, we'd love for you to share it with our audience. Just put a few words in the chat sharing what it is, and we're happy to use that as sort of a segue into our program today. So the three folks who are joining us on the panel today probably need their own storage space because not everything they have is stored digitally, although you're going to get to see examples from their respective collections today in the digital format. We'll get to hear from them if there's ever going to be an opportunity to see, touch, walk around these things in a physical museum, and in some cases there may be that opportunity. But we're being joined by our good friend, first foremost, who whispered in our ear and said, hey, there are other crazy people like me out there who collect stuff that really is valuable, not only from a monetary sense, but really from the preservation of history, from the transmission of stories into the future. And we're so thrilled to be back with David Matlow, who is the founder of the Herzl project and has brought us many different opportunities to look at the history of the World Zionist Congress and Herzl and pre-state Israel and how that led into Israel's global presence thereafter. David comes to us from Canada, where he's an attorney, but has literally put together the largest collection in the world of memorabilia around Herzl. So we're happy to be able to share some of David's collection, but also from his friends and colleagues who do this as well. So Gregg Philipson, who's joining us from Austin, Texas, a place that we love. We recently did a program featuring Black's barbecue in Austin, a fourth generation. We had a barbecue pitmaster in Israel, teamed up with the famed barbecue pit family in Austin, Texas. So it's great to have our Texas friends and presence with us today. Gregg is the principal at the Gregg and Michelle Philipson collection. and archive, which is in Austin, Texas. He's a commissioner from the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commission. He brings a wealth of experience, stories, and memorabilia, some of which you can see sort of surrounding him as examples of that, which he's going to share with us in a moment. And what to round out our group today, we were supposed to have two panelists from Israel. Unfortunately, we were not able to bring one. David Sela lost his voice, has laryngitis, can't join us. So we are so grateful to have Hadi Orr with us from Ramat Gan, where he is, or somewhere in Tel Aviv, but has a career in graphics and art and design, ran a studio in Tel Aviv for many years. About 15 years ago, he set up the Israeliana Museum, which I believe is currently hosted in Ramat Gan, and is bringing us just a wealth of experience from Israel about Israel. And we'll hear the vision and examples of that from his collection. He lectures on this material frequently, and we're excited to have him for the first time on our program today. So Gregg, Texas is big. We all know that. And so we're going to let you kick off with pieces from your collection and a sharing from the slides that you have to understand better, not only what you have in your collection, but sort of what has brought you into this world and continues to sustain your activity today.
Well, thank you, Wayne. And as we get ready here, I will tell you that to answer your question, what really got us into it, I speak internationally about the Holocaust, and we have a very deep connection in our families, both from an American military perspective, as well as my wife's father was a Holocaust survivor from Poland. So that's really what got us into this. And what we call it is not so much collecting artifacts, but rescuing the evidence. And it's evidence about our heritage. And it's not just evidence from the Holocaust or some of the not so good things that have befallen the Jewish people. It's really about protecting our heritage. So what you'll see from me today are just a few things that we discuss that would fit into the motif of Israel's 75th anniversary. But our collection covers so many things on Jewish heritage, and whether that's Jewish magicians, Jewish strongmen, the Holocaust, Jewish military history, individual artists, and so on. But what we're going to do is we'll start today by talking about Israel's 75th birthday. And I'm just going to adjust my screen here. Sorry about that. And I wanted to do this by showing, these are what we call wire photos. And wire photos were started by the Associated Press in 1935, I believe. And they were images that were transmitted over the wire. So they may have been transmitted via telegraph or radio, whatever. And when they were received by a organization that would publish things, a newspaper, a magazine, they would be on a negative and developed immediately like a piece of film in a darkroom. That's what people used to do. So what you're seeing are authentic collectibles in this particular collection. And this is a beautiful photo. I wanted to start with something really positive. The flag of Israel, which carries, of course, the Star of David in the center, next to this little Jewish baby who is Ira Bruce Stern. And he's photographed at the Brooklyn Jewish Hospital. And he was born a few minutes after the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel, I will say, not Eretz Yisrael, was done. And I liked it especially because his father, Robert Stern, was a veteran who fought both in Africa and in Europe to liberate not just the Jewish people, but to liberate Europe from all the fascists. It's a beautiful thing. And this particular one was used in a newspaper. It's dated, it ran in May of 1948, but notice that that's all in Spanish. And that's basically the translation is what you see down below there. So even a newest baby here in the United States after the state of Israel was even shown in a paper in South America. Now, this is one of my favorite pieces. So this is Ergun Etzel. This is an original newspaper from April of 1948, just prior, obviously, to Israel's independence in May. And this is really a very, very important piece of history. What you're looking at, and again, you can't see this unless I would show multiple slides, which we don't have time for. The little articles, the little blocks you see there on the left-hand side, each one of those talks about a skirmish around Israel during April of 1948, just as independence is pending. And the other beautiful part, we have one of the largest private collections on a famous Jewish Polish artist named Arthur Szyk. And if you're not familiar with him, it's spelled S-Z-Y-K. I put it up on the top there for you. That's an incredible illustration of his idea or a rendition of a fighter for the Jewish army. And he was a really big proponent in many of his artwork during World War II, advocating for a Jewish army. So anyway, this is a beautiful, it's an Irgun newspaper, and it talks about independence. And actually, I think you could see that possibly over my shoulder in the other image. Now, I really love this photo. The photo was actually taken on May 9th, but it ran, as you can see on the back side. All of these wire photos, when they came from, when they were developed, they would type up or from a teletype, put a information panel glued onto the back, giving the information if it ran with an article or ran independent of an article. And this one, as you can see, possibly see, is a illustration from May 9th that ran in a newspaper or newspapers on the 14th of showing a early Israeli IDF officer, a Palmach fighter, launching a mortar attack on Arab positions. It's a really interesting photo, action photo of early Israeli military. Now, this is what was going on. This is celebrating in May 2nd, again, just a couple of weeks before independence, what it looked like. You see the Kova Temple hats and how people were just walking around. This is the early Israeli army getting ready for a number of skirmishes that were already in effect with the Arabs. Another one, Israeli soldiers in action, dated May 26th, a little bit after. But again, you can see that the actual amount of fighting that was going on, not in major battles, but these little skirmishes from town to town, from kibbutz to kibbutz, it was remarkable. And these are important photos because they really document the kind of citizen army, if you will, that was going on in Israel at this particular time. I love this particular photo, and it says the girl and youth of the Haganah, the Jewish National Army, at the outposts were already seasoned veterans of fighting. And as you can see, the date at the bottom, 429 to 48. It's a fantastic picture, of Jewish fighters, both men and women. As we know, everyone was involved. These are really rare historical photos, and they are originals. Now, this one is something that's not so positive. So in this particular photo, it says the bodies of some of the 34 Jewish men and women killed in an Arab ambush of a Hadassah hospital. And we have a very large Hadassah collection as well. But the Hadassah hospital convoy lie burning in the street and so on. And so what happened was they really nailed the convoy. Everybody was killed at that particular time. And the reason I wanted to show this is, it shows the really true depth of tragedy. Nurses and doctors there to tend to our wounded, being murdered at that particular time. And the other reason I wanted to show it was for this. This is a full-page New York Times ad that ran on 4 May of 1948. This is how these photos would be utilized. So the New York Times received that photo that you just saw, and then, along with the United Jewish Appeal of Greater New York, used that to create a fundraising ad showing thus ended their mission of mercy. Ours has just begun. Powerful stuff. It talks up in the top left-hand corner about the Jewish nurses die in flames in a Palestine convoy attack. So this is a prime example of finding the photos, but then finding places where they actually ran, the newspapers and magazines. One of my favorite items here, and I'll ask you to take a look very closely at that Time magazine. If you're not aware, David Ben-Gurion appeared on 3 different Time magazine covers. This is the 1956 cover. He appeared in 48, 56, and once again in 57. So what you're looking at is I have this all framed. That is David Ben-Gurion's original signature right near above his eyes next to his forehead, to the right of his forehead, if you can see that. And what this was a very popular, pardon me, thing for collectors around the United States. They would send the Time magazine covers, because Time ran people on their covers every week, to the people to try to get their autographs. And this one I'm very fortunate to have. Here's David Ben-Gurion's signature, along with the letter from the Prime Minister's office saying that attached is or enclosed is the requested signature on the Time magazine cover. And it's really nice because the address label on the cover matches the address that it was sent to on the letter. And a beautiful piece just to have David Ben-Gurion's signature is quite rare, and having this with the letter authenticated is really, with the provenance, is really terrific. As we move along, I'm hoping that most people here today recognize the gentleman on the right. That is Mickey Marcus. I would say he was the first aluf, the first general in the Israeli army. And his name was David. It went by Mickey Marcus. He's a hero of the United States Army. He was a full-bird colonel. He parachuted on D-Day into Normandy. He did tremendous amounts of things in his history. You really should look him up. In addition to being involved in planning out the Nuremberg trials against the Nazis in Nuremberg, Germany, in 1945, 6, and 7, and even 1948. Brilliant guy. He was asked by Ben-Gurion, as he was a reserve officer in the United States Army, to come to Israel and help design and train and put into place some things to make the IDF a better organized and better fighting unit, if you will. Tragically, he was killed. I'll go, the picture that I'm showing ties to David Ben-Gurion. Marcus was a West Point graduate, U.S. Military Academy, really brilliant guy. And every year, still to this day, there is a wreath-laying ceremony at his grave at West Point in New York, at our military academy there. And this is David Ben-Gurion in 1951, actually came and paid his respects to Mickey Marcus, and you can see that's an original wire photo. Now this photo here, as we're kind of winding down, so this is David Mickey Marcus. So he went to the United States Army and said, hey, listen, I really want to go and help out the Israelis. But, you know, when you're in the U.S. Army, you can't just arbitrarily go fight for another, especially if you're an officer, you can't just fight for another nation. So they told him it was okay, but he should enlist there as Michael Stone. And you know, he was one of the Machal fighters, right? The foreign fighters that went to support the new nation of Israel. And this particular photo, I have a number of photos of the burial and so on. But this is really important because what you're noticing here is the airplane arrives in New York on June 30th of 1948. He was killed in a very sad incident by an Israeli sentry. And you could read more about that online. But nonetheless, this is, you see his casket being lowered from the airplane, some dignitaries coming off the steps of the plane. And notice that there's no US soldiers, that those are New York State police officers. And the reason it is this, he couldn't have a US military funeral, although there were soldiers that showed up at the gravesite. But at this particular, this honor guard, he was the head of the Department of Corrections for the city of New York. And that's why you see police officers there. That's who he would have been in charge of earlier before he went over to Israel. And the final point I want to make about this, do you notice who's coming down the staircase there? And then in the second picture below, following the casket, taking it to the cemetery. That is a very young Moshe Dayan, one of the greatest Israeli fighters in our time. So it made for a very, very special photograph and some really tremendous Israeli, not only military history, but showing really some of the real heroes in the defense of the state of Israel. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Matlow. I hope I stayed within my time frame. If people have questions, I'm sure that the folks here can get you in touch with me. We do have the Gregg and Michelle Philipson collection and archive. We're currently exhibiting at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and the Texas State History Museum here in Austin. So with that, I thank you for your kind attention, and I hope everybody learned maybe a little something today.
Thank you, Greg.
So thank you, Greg. That was amazing, and I learned a lot, and I'm going to now screen share. So as you heard, I'm a collector primarily of Herzl memorabilia. I have 6,000 items in my collection, and it was Herzl who envisioned the state of Israel. So naturally, items relating to the fulfillment of his vision are an important part of my collection. So a few years ago, I put together this collage with just a variety of items in my collection. But fortunately, I've included the first David Ben-Gurion on the cover of Time magazine. This was the 1948 version that Greg referred to in his remarks, and some of these we'll talk about in a little more detail. Greg talked about all of the violence. The War of Independence essentially broke out before Israel's independence. The UN Partition Resolution of November 29, 1949, was the United Nations recognition of the creation of a Jewish state and gave the British 6 months to leave. And the British said they would be leaving on the 15th of May. And you saw from Greg's presentation, the death and destruction and the things that were happening to try and prevent the state from being created, and a very tense and difficult time. What you have in front of you is a special prayer, a booklet for a prayer service that was issued by the rabbinate of Jerusalem for a prayer session to take place on Thursday, May the 13th. So the independence, as we would know, took place on Friday, May 14th. So this is the day before. And in Hebrew, it says that it's a special prayer service on the eve of the fateful hour in our Holy Land, Erev Hasha'ah HaGoralit, B'Artzeinu HaKadosha. So this was obviously, everyone knew something momentous and frightening was about to happen. And so this was on the Thursday before the Friday. On the very same day, and you can see at the top, 13/5/1948, the date, invitations were issued for people to come to the Declaration of Independence ceremony, the momentous event, most momentous event in Jewish history in 2,000 years, was to take place on Friday, May 14th, 1948. And the invitation to it was on a mimeographed piece of paper, folded in half, that was delivered by bicycle couriers to about 200 people. And so the ceremony itself took place in the Art Museum in Tel Aviv. It's now Independence Hall. It's under construction. It's being renovated, but it's on 16 Rothschild Street. And you're asked to keep this, the invitation asked the recipients to keep this event secret. There was great concern that if this was public, then steps might be taken by the Arab enemies to try and intercede, stop this ceremony. So people were asked to keep it secret. Please be in your seats by 3:30. It says the invitation is personal, so you could not transfer it. You couldn't put it up on the Palestinian StubHub of 1948, and you're asked to wear dark festive clothing. And so 200 or so people received this invitation, and this is one of the jewels in my collection. Everything you're seeing is something that I own in my collection. The ceremony itself was designed. This is a drawing. Many of us would have seen the picture of David Ben-Gurion reading the Declaration of Independence under a portrait of Herzl. David Ben-Gurion asked a gentleman named Otto Wallisch, who was a graphic designer, a stamp designer, posters. You'll see a stamp that he designed coming up shortly. He asked him to design this ceremony. Ben-Gurion knew this was historic, and he wanted to capture this image in the most appropriate way. So Otto Wallisch, the designer, found the portrait of Herzl at the offices of the Jewish National Fund. Those two flags were put up, a table with a tablecloth and people seated, as you will see. And this was done later. It is a drawing by the designer Otto Wallisch, signed by him. And so it was at this moment that David Ben-Gurion read the Declaration of Independence, and in the Declaration of Independence said what the name of the country would be. Until this moment, nobody knew what the new Jewish state would be called. This is a newspaper that was issued. It's a joint issue of all the Israeli newspapers. I dare say this has not happened since. Issued at 4 o'clock, the precise moment that David Ben-Gurion read the Declaration of Independence on May 14th. It's a joint edition. And in Hebrew on the masthead, it says the last day of governance by strangers. And the headline, the nation declares the state of Israel. And under Herzl's picture, the gentleman with the beard on the right, it says all of the laws of the white paper are nullified. The very first act of business of the Israeli government after the Declaration of Independence, the cabinet went into a meeting and nullified the white paper rules. Those white paper rules essentially prohibited immigration into Palestine imposed by the British, which obviously was a very deadly law that they passed because it doomed millions of Jews in Europe to their death during the Holocaust. But the first act of the new government was to get rid of these laws. The backside, this is a one-page newspaper. The backside of this paper describes the battles and the skirmishes that were going on, some of which were described in Gregg's presentation. I mentioned Otto Wallisch. He was a stamp designer and he designed these stamps. These are Israel's first postage stamps. They were issued, the Declaration of Independence was declared on a Friday. The British were leaving on a Saturday. This was just like a last shot by the British to leave on a Saturday. Obviously, the Jewish Sabbaths, which required the Declaration of Independence to be done on the Friday before sundown. And on Sunday morning, the post offices in the new state of Israel had these stamps that were available to be sold. And the existence of these stamps were announced by an equivalent of a press release on Thursday, May 13th, the same day as the prayer service I described at the outset. And this was the first tangible indication for the Jewish population of Palestine that the state was about to be declared. And what's interesting about these stamps, for those who read Hebrew, and if you don't, it says Doar Ivri, which translates to Hebrew post. The name Israel is not on these stamps because they were printed before the name of the country was known. So this is the first time in history that stamps of a nation were printed and sold, well, printed before the name of the country was known. And the design that Wallish put on these stamps is of ancient Roman coins during the period of the rebellion of the Jewish community of ancient Israel against the Romans, connecting the Jewish people's ancient history and connection with this land to the newly reborn country that happened that day. And if you stop to think, what are all the things you need in order to create a country between May 13th and May 14th? Of course, you need an army, and we heard about that from Gregg, stamps, police, and also a banking system and banknotes. And so the provisional government, even before the country was established, went about ordering banknotes. What would the name of the currency be? And like with the stamps, the banknotes were ordered before the name of the country was known. So these were issued by the Anglo-Palestine Bank, which was a bank established by Herzl in 1899. It became the Bank of Israel until the National Bank was created in the early 50s. And what was the name of the first currency of the state of Israel? Palestine pounds, because these were printed before the state of Israel name was known. These arrived in Israel in July and first went into circulation in August of 1948. Two more slides to give you an indication of things that were going on. This takes us not away from Palestine to New York City, or Israel, into New York City. This is the cover of a magazine. It's the size of a Life magazine for those of us who remember Life magazine, so it's a rather large size. It's the program for a fundraising event called the Night of Stars that was put on by the United Palestine Appeal, which is a predecessor to the New York UJA campaign and the Jewish Federations of North America. It was held at Madison Square Gardens. It started in 1935 in Yankee Stadium and then moved to Madison Square Gardens. And it was a benefit with the stars of the day. Milton Berle, Red Buttons, Maury Amsterdam, Mickey Rooney came out in support of Israel. But I love this image because it is the image of the pioneer of the new country of Israel, building the country with a farming device. I think it's a hoe or a shovel on the shoulder, but also a gun that we're prepared to build, but we're also prepared to defend. And the heading above it, and Jacob shall return, and none shall make him afraid. The idea of the Jewish homeland, the state of Israel, which was the fulfillment of Herzl's vision, that there should be a place where Jewish people can live in peace and do our own thing and be left alone. So that remains a work in progress, as we all know, but Herzl's vision continues to inspire. And the very last one is this item, which is for those of people who are collectors and know baseball cards and Topps baseball cards. In 1954, Topps issued a series of cards about historic global moments. And among the various moments that they chose, including the building of the Panama Canal and the San Francisco earthquake and something known to Canadians, the Dion quintuplets, is this card celebrating Israel's independence, which really shows that the interest of the revival of Jewish life in the whole in Israel, in the state of Israel, was followed and continues to be followed, for better for worse, around the world. So much of what you've seen comes from a weekly column that I have in the Canadian Jewish News. And for Israel's 75th birthday, I put together a book, 75 Treasures, which is available for free download. And it has 75 of these items. And you see on the cover the image from the Night of Stars. So I want to thank you for listening, and thank my friends Gregg and Hadi for joining me in the celebration of Israel and of collecting.
Thanks, David. Hadi, I know this is not a competition, but I feel like you have home court advantage here on the stuff that you get to show us. So as our resident Sabra on the panel today, I guess I want to ask you first, before you start, just how do you feel knowing that there's such love and interest in what might be thrown out by some Israeli, that they take for granted, an asimon or some just artifact from the past that becomes a rich and deep memory of the history of Israel and the Jewish people, and how have you as an Israeli come to the creation of your collection to make that something that people can understand and access better?
First thing, it's warmed my heart to see that I have Jewish around the world, that they are so attached to Israel, that Israel is my home country. My father born in Israel and I in Israel. I born in Israel, and even now people say to me, why you are not moving to Canada, which I am now in vacation in Canada. I will die in Israel as well. I am very touched and moved from what I heard from David, and I know David for many years, and from all of you. And it is unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. It's something that it's moved me very deeply. I want to say before I start, one more thing is, first, I live in Tel Aviv. My museum, which I don't like to call it museum, because museum, you need a regulation, you need the right, everything. But a place that I have most of my collection, it's in Ramat Gan. And now, because we are visiting in Canada, and I cannot take you with video in my place, I prepare a movie for the thing. The other thing is that I am, I would say, handicapped or disadvantaged compared to those two speakers before me, that their English is mother tongue, and I'm not in this level. I speak with every accent, every Israeli accent, and my level of English is not as good, but I will try to do my best. If you want to see the movie or the video that I made for my place, here it is. Hi, shalom, ברוכים הבאים. Come in. Hi, my name is Hadi Orr. I'm Israeli. I live in Israel. A matter of fact, all my family live in Israel. My father born in Israel. And I am a collector. I collect Israeliana. You know what is Israeliana? It's exactly like Americana, only in Israel. I have few major collection, and I have other collections that we will talk about it later. I will talk shortly, really shortly, and I will show you a little bit of each of my collection, and we will continue and we will start from this. My major collection, or I would say my first collection, was miniature alcohol bottles. Here it's Israeli one. In the first time that I flew to the States, after a few hours, the stewards came and say, do you want something to drink? I said, what do you have? And she started, I have cognac, I have whiskey, I have this. And I'm talking about almost 45 years ago. I was not a drinker. I said to her, can I see the bottles? She showed it to me. I choose the nicest one. In this trip, I met my wife. She's Canadian. And when we got married, she brought 20 bottles, and here I start the collection. During the years, I found out that what I'm more excited about it's the Israeli bottles, as you can see here, and the Palestine, the bottles that produced before Israel was established. So from the miniature alcohol bottles, I found out that the Palestine, it's more excited, I'm more attached, and since then I start to collect papers, label, menus, anything that belong to the Israeli or Eretz Israel alcohol. And as a matter of fact, we are working several years to try to do a book about the industry of the alcohol in Israel. So it's going a little bit slowly, but we are working on it. So those is the label. As a matter of fact, all those things, it's about Palestine in Carmel Mizrahi. I have different kind, but this is Carmel Mizrahi, as you can see, many labels. My second important, very important collection is about El Al. El Al, established in 1948, in the first flight to bring our president from Geneva, but it's really start in middle of 1949. I have a picture from the first flight to Geneva to bring the president, and the most important things that I have in all my collection is what it's called a personal flying logbook that every pilot needs to write where he came, where he go, when, whatever. And this booklet, it's one of the crew that brought Eichmann from Argentina in 1960. Besides the captains that knew that they are going to bring Eichmann in the flight, the crew didn't know that Eichmann there. Only in the end of the flight, they told them that the passenger that they have, that he is sleepy, he is Eichmann, and they kidnapped him to Israel. It was in 1960. In 1962, he had the trial, and after then, they killed him. This is my second important collection. The third one is about Shanot Tovot, New Year card, the Jewish New Year card. Here it's only one of my many kind of that I have. This is about the Brigada, 1944, 1945, 1946, that the Jewish from Israel went to the Brigada, to the British, to help them to fight against the Nazis. Okay. The fourth one of my collection, let's put it aside, is hotels. Hotels, I try to collect hotels from the Ottoman period of time, and it's mean until 1917 when the British came and the mandate of the British in Israel. Here I have postcards. Again, I took only one few postcards. You're talking about hotel in Tel Aviv, hotel in Jerusalem. That was at the period of time until 1917. This hotel, it's in the old city in Jerusalem, opposite of Migdal David, and you are talking about many different kind of postcards on those hotels. As I say from the beginning of our meeting, I have two parts of this event. The first event that we are talking about, it was my collections that I mentioned it, and I show it really little bit of it. The second part of our meeting is, you know that every country have what it's called a museum about their past. I'm not talking about the temple, I'm not talking about something that happened 1,000 years ago, I'm talking about something that happened the last 100 years. And this is what I'm doing here. I am privately establish a museum about Israeliana. Beside my collection, I try to keep up the history, our history in Israel what's happened in the last 100 years. Come and see what I'm talking about and what is the target of my meeting. Come. That's all, folks. Thank you very much for joining me in my tour in my Israeliana Museum, and hope that one day all of us we will succeed to create a real Israelia Museum. See you when next time that you are in Israel. You are more than welcome to come visit me. Bye bye. Have a nice day.
Hadi, I'm verklempt. I just feel this rush over the Ethernet of people really just appreciating so many of those images and items that you have in a modest but very genuine space somewhere in the Mediterranean, or at least somewhere in Ramat Gan. So thank you for taking us on that personal insight at tour, even while you're out of the country now. I have questions for all of you that are coming in. I guess I just to level the playing field, I'm going to give each of you an opportunity. At the top of the show, we had people call in with their personal memorabilia and things that they have found. So I want to talk about sources. Maybe you can share a story, each of you, of an unusual source where you came across one of your treasured pieces for your collection. And I think, yeah, why don't we just start there to give each of you an opportunity, and then we'll see how many we can get to. We have one of the people answered that they literally fished out of the Mediterranean from Caesarea a broken Roman artifact, and there are many people who have talked about how they have personal Judaica that was created from bullet cases or other things from wars, et cetera, et cetera. that they might have found in a flea market or even in some Judaica stores. But I'm curious for each of the three of you, where did you come across something that was a little bit unusual and you didn't expect for your collection? Gregg, why don't we start with you real quick?
Well, I would have to say that the thing that comes to my mind is a letter, and it's Holocaust related. It's not really Israeliana. It's a letter by a famous woman, a Catholic nurse from Warsaw, Poland, named Irina Sendler. And I have in the collection an original 6-page handwritten letter by her in its original envelope from Warsaw in 1942. And it's an important piece of history because she saved about 2,500 Jewish babies and children from the Warsaw Ghetto, her and her network. And it was unusual in the sense that I have a very good friend in Poland. He's a Catholic Polish man and a real gentleman, and he's now retired as well. And he ran across that letter on an auction in Poland that I wouldn't have had access to. And he actually went ahead. I told him, that I wanted it. So just bid whatever you have to. And we ended up acquiring that. And it's really something really, really important because it's a piece of Holocaust history about an upstander, about somebody that cared about people. And it's one of the things when we talk to kids in schools and high schools and middle schools that they're able to touch, even though it's in a sleeve, that's something that they can physically use to identify with what I'll call a hero of one of the most tragic events in the world's history. So, and obviously there's not enough of those, so it's important to highlight the ones that were there. So for me, that was a rather unusual opportunity to get something very important to my collection.
Thanks for sharing that. David, I'm going to jump in and piggyback a question from the audience as well. I always love your stamps and your posters that from your collection. And there was a question about stamps that had actually been created pre-48. And the question is whether or not some of those were considered illegal during the British mandatory period in particular. And as you, in your collection of things, are there items that you have that are even of greater value because, let's say, they were considered illegal at the time, or produced some in an underground way before the state?
So it's a great question in terms of stamps, and there's a lot of stamp historians and collectors who look at this issue. In April of 1948, the British essentially said, we're out of here, we're stopping postal services, we can't be responsible for things. So I think it was April 16th or so. So for a month period, it's Jewish ingenuity. The Jewish National Fund, we had stamps that we would get in school as kids. That were for fundraising. And so Jewish National Fund stamps were repurposed to be postage stamps, and they were imprinted with the word doar, which means stamp. So it's called the interim period between April 16th and May 1948. The doar Ivri stamps that I showed were printed illegally. They were, because if the British knew that it was illegal to do it. So it was printed in a secret location. Where do you get in Palestine in 1948 a press to make stamps and then roulette it, put those little dots in, so you could tear the stamps? And so they had to find a rouletting machine. They borrowed a printing press from the Haaretz newspaper. So those were made illegally. And another element in my collection in terms of illegality, I have some items from the paramilitary organizations that existed in Palestine during the British Mandate. The Lehi, Lochmei Cherut Yisrael, the soldiers for the freedom of Israel, and the Haganah. And so pamphlets and threatening letters to the British is a separate collection for another time, which I have.
Hadi, we have numerous questions about dolls. I guess we saw some of the figurines that were displayed, And I'm wondering, did you what were your did you like raid kibbutzim, the ganim, and get anything from them? There's I have a personal privilege question. Have you come across a Ruti Smartuti doll from the 70s period?
Yes. Okay. First, I want to answer on the questions that you asked before about how we get our stuff. So
Yes.
as it's go all over the world, when family, the older passed away, the family want to, whatever they want to take to keep for memory, and the other is all that they are calling a dealer or that they're giving as a present. In the end, it's most of it get to the flea market, which we are coming. I don't want to use a word of one treasure. Forget about it. It's our treasure. We are buying it there. The other option is to get it as a present. And as you saw in my video, the most important thing that I got is a book flight of that they brought Eichmann. One day, a woman contact in the, then it was a Asfanut, a collector in Tapuz in Israel. And she says, somebody want, I have 6 bottles of miniature alcohol. Somebody want it? I said, yes, I would like it. And then 2 weeks later, she said, do you want it? I said, yeah, I want it. And it went like 2 months like this. And as you know, as a man, when they put a rifle or a gun into our head, then we function well. So she said, okay, I see that you're not serious. I'm going to give it to somebody else. So I said, I'm coming. Where you live? I live in Givatayim. I say, in 15 minutes, I'm there. It took 2 months. Anyhow, I'm coming there, and then we are talking, and I see that she has all the bottle. It's Elal bottles, like miniature alcohol bottle. So I said, oh, it's weird because I'm the biggest at the time, and I think that even now, the biggest Elal collector in Israel, not in the world. In the world is Marvin Goldman in New York. He's a lawyer too. And I said to her, oh, I'm the biggest. So she said, come to my storage. I came to her storage, and then she said, you see this box, it's Elal stuff. My father was in the teams that brought Eichmann to Israel in Elal and whatever, and I'm debate what to do with it. But after that I met you and I heard all the story about Elal from you, I would like that you will have it. So I got it as a present. Of course, that I ran home. I remember that they brought Eichmann in 1960. Immediately I'm opening the book, tick, 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 to look what date. I didn't remember that he came in May, whatever. I looking, and then it is. So it's coming as a present. Now, about the doll. The doll that you saw there, it's not beside Ruti Smartuti, and have other things that it's more, it's called Bubazit, that in Kibbutz Gazit that they did it, that it's in other research that I did. Those things is that I did a book with Dr. Chaim Grossman that he passed away since then. One day we have, in flea market, we have breakfast, and then I bought this kind of doll that is from charcoal, from clay or whatever it is. And I said to him, I would like to know information of this. So he said to me, Hadi, you have so many more important things than those stupid doll. I said to him, you're right, but I am the one that with the money, and I will decide where to invest my money. So it took me 2 years, like we got the information where it's located in Tel Aviv. It was say Shkunat Maccabi, which we didn't know where is Shkunat Maccabi even. And then a friend of mine told me Shkunat Maccabi, Shkunat Atikva, whatever. We did 2 years until I succeed to get the information. And then we did a book of this guy that nobody knew anything about him. I asked all my friend collector, who is this manufacturer? Nobody knew. In the end, we succeed to get the information, and I publish a book for it, and then the knowledge is there. And this is my saying for all the collector is, besides that you're spending your time, and besides that you're spending your money, put it on writing. It can be a book, it can be a booklet, it can be 4 sentences. Just put it, because when you will go, and I don't know if you know, but all of us, one day we are going, not to Israel, going to different world. So the knowledge that we have, it will dismiss. So put it in a book, and that the knowledge will stay forever.
Hadi, what's the name of the book?
פורצלן לעניים. porcelain is like what they porcelain for poor people. It's from sort of a charcoal. That what they did is that they put lac on the thing is that it will look like porcelain. And you're talking about people that came from Europe and they didn't have the money to buy a real what? Plaster per, my wife said. And so it's looked like porcelain, and it was in any house. Like, for example, we have the woman, I know that it's not political correct to say, a black woman that with a hat of a cook and a pencil, that every kitchen, like in my lecture, and older people, I ask, do you know this? So everybody say, oh, that they had it in the house, or they know that their friend had it, but nobody knew any information. Now it's already 10 years. I don't, more than 10 years. So everybody know. And
well, I just want to underscore what Hadi said, and with it, because we've come to the top of the hour, about the documentary value of these collections, making them accessible. I mean, David has just been such a generous soul in sharing his materials and collections and distributing them in so many creative ways, introducing us to Gregg, and seeing, for any of you that'll be in DC and able to see any of his materials at the Holocaust Museum, or if you're in Austin, to have the accessibility to these incredible stories and documentation that bring both pride and interest and common bonds in so many different ways that bring that alive. And that really was what we had hoped for and intended. And I think it's true to spirit that when we had this idea of doing this webinar today about the 75th, someone said, well, we've already, the birthday is past. Why would you do it later? Well, that's part of the chutzpah. You get to celebrate happy things for a long time, not just one and done. And today, with the collections that each of you have, you've really helped us, I think, tap into that spirit of the miracle of the 75 years and the ongoing miracle, even with the challenges and even with the fashlot and other problems that come with 75 years of nationhood and nation building. There's so much that can be told in a porcelain doll story. There's so much that can be told in a stamp. There's so much that can be told in a ledger of an El Al, inscription. All these things have brought a great deal of treasure to our audience today. We want to thank you. For those of you that know that we love doing this, you will know and perhaps not be surprised. For the next couple of weeks, we're doing twofers. We're going to be around. We're sort of packing in a bunch of material before the holidays, and we'll have some days where we won't be broadcasting. If you come back this weekend on Sunday, September 3rd, that's Labor Day weekend in the United States, but we're still working. We're still laboring for you. We're doing our virtual tour to Arad, a really exciting place to visit, a jewel in the desert. Come visit us. Come join with us this Sunday to do the virtual tour of Arad. Next Wednesday, we've got Gabriela Weisinger back. Our gallery tour, we'll be doing another great gallery tour with her on September 6th on Wednesday, and then 2 more the following week. So come with us. We've got lots of material. Thanks to all our friends here and the panelists today for making this happen. We have people in the audience from Northern Florida, from Georgia, right in the hurricane path. Thanks for being with us today. Be safe, everyone. Enjoy. We're glad to be together for this time. Lehitrot.